Good day, Internet. Chavez and Valko here again with discussion of another non-immigrant visa. My name is Ben Hamilton. I am a senior associate attorney here at Chavez and Valko. With me, as always, is associate attorney Andrew Craven. And today we are going to be discussing the J-1 visa, which is a very diverse, very unique, very confusing visa. I know Andrew was doing a little bit of research in order to, put this together today. I hope you learned a lot. This is not one of the easier visas to deal with just because it does have so much sort of internal diversity, but it can be a very good option for trainees and interns and some other people we're going to talk about. It's a commonly used by people, let's say, who aren't selected in the H-1B lottery and their OPT is running out and they need to bridge their gap. So it's an interesting visa. So, Andrew, lay it on me. What's the basic definition of what is a J visa?
So basically, this allows foreign nationals to come to the U.S. as exchange visitors in order to receive training, participate in internships, do some other cool programs that are offered by sponsors designated by the Department of State.
So we're going to delve into that, but actually, I'm going to jump down here to sort of what are the different J-1 programs. Now, we don't have time to go into each one of these. They all have their own, specific requirements. The Department of State has created a website just for J-1s. It's actually pretty good and pretty informative, surprisingly, because some of the Department of State websites are not very good. It's j1visa.state.gov. You can always go there, click and see the different programs. But these would be professors and research scholars, short-term scholars, college and university students, teachers, secondary school students, specialists, physicians, international visitors, camp counselors, au pairs, summer work travel, trainees, interns. So there's a whole bunch of different J-1 programs. We're going to dedicate some of our discussion now to two of the most common that we deal with here at the firm, which would be the trainee and interns. So, Andrew, what is a J-1 intern?
So that's a foreign national participating in a structured and guided work-based internship program that either in their academic field that either is currently enrolled in a full-time and actively pursuing studies at a foreign recognized degree or certificate granting post-secondary program, or they've graduated from that kind of an institution no more than 12 months prior to the exchange visitor program start date.
So, intern is someone who's currently enrolled in a foreign university, basically, or graduated within the last 12 months. How about a trainee? What's a trainee?
So that would be someone who has either a degree or a professional certificate from a foreign post-secondary institution and at least 1 year of prior related work experience in their field, or 5 years of work experience in their occupation outside of the U.S.
So, we're looking at one is sort of either in school or just graduated outside the US. The other one is graduated and has a year of experience or has 5 years of experience. But the key there is that all of those apply to experience and education gained outside the United States. So, like I said, Jane, these categories sometimes come up for people looking to continue in the US when they're not selected in the H-1B cap. And so they're going from OPT to J-1, just as an example. And of course, you could run into an issue if their OPT was based on a US bachelor's degree and they have no foreign degree, then they probably wouldn't be eligible for either of these two specific programs. Now, if they got like a foreign bachelor's, came into the US, did like a master's, then they may be eligible for one of these programs. So what are well, actually, we're going to jump into another one that comes up a lot. That is au pair. What is uh, an au pair? What are the basic requirements?
So basically, the very basics of this is that the au pair is going to live with a U.S. host family, uh, and they'll participate in providing childcare services to that host family and attend a U.S. post-secondary institution, and either provide 45 up to 45 hours of childcare services per week while pursuing not less than 6 credit hours in the US. Or if they're going through the EduCare program, they provide up to 30 hours of childcare services per week while taking not less than 12 semester credit hours.
You can kind of think of it this way. What if I want to go to school in the US, but I need to work or something? Well, hey, you could be an au pair, right? That way you could actually work part-time as a caregiver legally but then also go to school. Of course, one of the other requirements is age-based. You have to be between 18 and 26, so you're not going to have like a 50-year-old au pair. But this is a category that we really don't deal a lot with on the front end, right? We're going to talk about how you actually get the J-1 and who you deal with. We do see a lot of au pairs more on the back end. So the host family, their time is coming to an end, but they really want to help that person stay in the US, maybe change to a different status. So we actually get a lot of those where the host family, again, it's really like this person wants to help them continue in the US, continue their studies, change, and then they're looking for options there. Um, Now, one we're going to delve in a little bit more detail later are physicians. But again, there's all of these programs. If you go to j1visa.state.gov, right, that is the State Department website where you'll be able to see each of the programs and then look at what their individual qualifications are. Now, putting aside the sort of individual programs, in general, what are some of the basic requirements for a J1?
So the basic requirements are it's got to be full time. The participant must not have immigrant intent. Um, the duration should be at least 3 weeks. In the case of internships, they should be longer than 12 months. Versus training programs shouldn't be longer than 18 months, with a few exceptions. Um, these positions also should not be for regular employment or to fill basically regular positions that could be occupied by American workers. Um, and the participant must generally have sufficient finances to support themselves.
So one thing you run into is a lot of people are like, "Hey, I want to hire this guy to work. I don't know, let's say in my factory. I'm having a tough time staffing." Um, Obviously, if you are trying to use the J1 to sort of fill a what is normally be a full-time position, um, they're not going to let you do that, right? They're going to say this is not what this is for. This is for an internship or a trainee. If you need to fill this position in your factory, maybe look at like the H-2B or some other visa option. So it's also kind of important that you look at the position and make sure it works. Obviously, one of the things about the J-1 is non-immigrant intent. This applies to a lot of visa categories, but in general, Andrew, what do they mean by non-immigrant intent?
So in this case, they really mean that you have to demonstrate that you have a residence abroad, that you have no intention of abandoning. They also want to see things like evidence of continued enrollment in school or some other programs in your home country, uh, you know, bank statements, family ties, things of that nature.
Basically, does the officer believe that when the J-1 program concludes that you will return to your home country? And again, this applies to a lot of, well, basically applies to every visa except the H and the L. So always be prepared to address immigrant intent. So again, we kind of mentioned this a little bit already, but what is the sort of legal definition or distinction between work and training?
So the State Department says that essentially they recognize that work is an essential component of on-the-job training. And that, in a lot of cases, there's not a real clear distinction. But at the same time, they say that, trainees, while they're performing work as a component, as a part of their training, the work is only part of the learning program that is designed to enhance the trainee's skill or occupational specialty through exposure to American techniques, methodology, and expertise versus, just straight up work.
Yeah. So are you really learning something as opposed to like you're just on the line there making widgets? Um, and not just learning how to make widgets, but learning something more. Um, so can J1s get paid?
Yes, so they can actually receive a salary from the sponsor organization or the host organization, as long as the activities that they're doing are part of that program.
So obviously, when they talk about them having to have sufficient funds to support themselves, is their sort of salary factored into that, or is that part of it?
Yes. So if they want that salary to be considered, or if they're going to receive a salary, they basically need to outline that in one of the forms that's a part of the process called the DS 2019. Um, and they would list that out in the application for those funds to be deemed as a sufficient a part of their ability to support themselves.
Yeah, and then again, if it's a position where maybe you're not getting paid or not getting paid a lot, the normal stuff you would use to show that you can support yourself, or like bank statements, proof of assets, proof of financial support. That can be from like parents or whoever, just to show that you'll be able to stay here and not become dependent on the state for help. So what are the type of occupations that you can be a J1 trainee in?
So the ones that are listed out are agricultural, forestry, and fishing occupations, arts and culture, construction or building trades, then educational, library sciences, social services, health related occupations, hospitality and tourism, information and media communications, general management, business, finance, even public administration, law, and of course, sciences, engineering, mathematics, and things of that nature.
So the general occupations, I'd say, pretty broad. My experience has been that I've never really seen someone get turned down because of the specific occupation, but rather because of the specific, actually the details regarding the specific position. Um, so what is not allowed?
So big things that aren't allowed are programs involving unskilled or casual labor positions. Any programs that require or involve childcare, elder care, or clinical or other kinds of work that involve patient care or patient contact. Especially anything that would require the trainee to provide therapy, medication, or other medical care. Also, programs that involve more than just 20% clerical work, programs that put the trainee or intern in positions that could bring the exchange visitor program into notoriety or disrepute. And finally, training programs in the field of aviation.
Yeah, I wonder why aviation got added. Anyway, so again, you're really not gonna get a J1 for like a secretary. It's not about being an intern or trainee, because that would involve a lot of clerical work. Um, so again, this is more of we kind of have to look at each one on a case-by-case basis just to make sure that the position that's being offered under the J-1 trainee or intern program, is going to pass muster and be accepted. This is where we get into some of the kind of uniqueness of the J-1 visa. So J-1 sponsors and host organizations, those are not the same thing. They're two different things. So who's involved in the J-1 program?
So the USA would want to be the host organization, would be the one that's conducting the actual training or internship program on behalf of that designated sponsor, pursuant to an executed written agreement between those two. The sponsor in these circumstances is sometimes referred to as just an umbrella organization.
Under normal circumstances, most visas, right? Your employer decides they want to hire you. So then your employer submits an application either through USCIS or sometimes straight to the Department of State, or even sometimes directly to CBP, in case of Canadian TNs. But anyway, the employer directly submits an application to sponsor you. The weird thing about the J's is that most employers can't, right? They have to go through some type an umbrella organization, right? The program sponsor. It's this weird thing where you have to involve this third party in most cases, and they're going to want to get paid in order to set this up and get the J. Now, there's a few exceptions. There's a few companies that are big enough and I guess use the program enough that they decided to go out and get basically qualified as program sponsors, so they're like the program sponsor and the host organization. But these are like Exxon, HP, Intel, Microsoft, Disney, Price Waterhouse, PwC, Ernst Young, EY. So there's just a handful of companies that can kind of do this on their own. Everybody else usually has to go, through a program sponsor. So, what are the requirements to be a host organization?
So to be a host organization, they actually have to work with the program sponsor, and that program sponsor is going to ensure that they're completing basically the application for the whole process, the DS 7002, to confirm that the placement is appropriate and meets with the objectives of that J-1 program. They also have to notify the sponsor if that J-1 beneficiary has any major change or deviation from the original internship that was submitted, or also if there's any emergencies involving that trainee. They also have to make sure that they're complying with all federal, state, and local occupational safety, health and safety laws. And generally compliance with all the rules set forth for completion of the mandatory program evaluation, and placement must be tailored to the skills and experience of the individual intern.
Now, remember, the host organization is the employer, the direct employer. So they have a lot of obligations, and then of course they're going to the program sponsor, who's this third party. So what are the qualifications, sort of requirements of a J-1 sponsor?
So they're going to ensure that the trainees or interns are appropriately selected, oriented, supervised, placed, and evaluated. They're also going to be available if the trainees or interns, or if the host organization in some cases, to assist and facilitate different information and resources for them. They're also going to ensure that the training or internship programs provide a balance between the trainee and interns' learning opportunities and their contributions to the organization, that host organization that they're placed with. They're also going to make sure that they're meeting the full-time requirements and ensure that the host organization and third parties involved in the recruitment, selection, evaluation, and all of that uh, for the training program are sufficiently educated on the goals and objectives and the rules around that program.
So let's kind of put this into plain English because, man, this starts to get a bit confusing. I have an employer, a potential employer in the United States that wants this, thinking that maybe they could hire me as an intern or trainee. Unless it's like, again, Exxon or Microsoft, they can't get the J-1 directly. They have to go to a program sponsor. So the first thing you can do is go to that State Department website, right? j1visa.state.gov. There you can search for program sponsors based by the program. So you can search for au pair programs, for trainee, for intern. And you'll tend to find that there's a lot of groups that have set themselves up to service a specific program or a specific area. So, for example, you'll see the American Hospitality Academy, which is a program sponsor you could go to if you're looking for, a J-1 related to the hospitality industry. Now, one of the biggest ones that deals with trainees and interns is the American Immigration Council. It's a big immigration advocacy group, but sort of a subset of some of the stuff they do is they're set up to be a J1 sponsoring organization. So the idea is that the company has to go to the American Immigration Council, and they say, "Hey, American Immigration Council, we have, we would like to get a J1 for this person over here as a trainee." So obviously, the American Immigration Council, they've been approved by the government to do this, but obviously they want to keep that approval, right? Because it makes a lot of money for them. So they need to make sure that they properly vet the host organization and the position and the prospective employee, right? So if you go to the American Immigration Council website, you can actually see what some of the things they're looking for are. And they actually list them out here just as an example. The evidence that the company's been operational for a minimum of 2 years, have at least 6 full-time employees, qualified personnel available to provide daily on-site supervision of trainees or interns, and it kind of goes down that, right? So you can go look at this list. And if you feel, okay, I think we have a position that qualifies as an intern or trainee, also we think that our company qualifies, then you can reach out to someone like AIC and say, hey, we want to do this. Obviously, AIC is going to want to gather a bunch of documentation, including the 7002, which is the sort of trainee or intern plan that the company has to fill out. And it's usually filled out by like quarter. Like, hey, this quarter, this is the stuff that they're going to do. This is what they're going to learn. And also you have to throw in what's the cultural things they're going to learn. Oh, hey, they're going to be, that's going to be during Christmas, and they're going to learn about American Christmas, which is basically presents and lots of lights. So it's this sort of weird thing unique to the J1, right? Where you have to go through this host, or you get the host organization, the employer has to go through a program sponsor in order to do this. Now, what's the thing? If I go to AIC and everything gets approved through AIC, what is it that I'm looking to get from them?
The DS 2019.
There you go. So if any of you all are familiar with the student visa, you'll know that you have to go to the school and get an I-20, right? No I-20, no student visa. That's the most important thing, is the school has access to a database that allows them to set everything up and then issue you an I-20. For J's, it's similar. The program sponsor has access to the government database that once everything's set up, it allows them to issue a DS 2019. DS2019. That is the key document you're looking to get. Once you have the DS 2019, then you can file a change of status if you're here, or go and apply for the visa if you're abroad. But that's what all of this kind of comes back to. You figure out what category or program you think you qualify for. You find a host organization. And again, a host organization, if you're an au pair, can be a family. And then obviously you go to the program sponsor, give them everything they need, pay any fees that need to be paid, and at the end of the day, get a DS 2019. By the way, Andrew, I don't know if you know this fact, but Do you know if you're a family looking to sponsor and bring in an au pair, do you know what the cost of that is in terms of what you have to pay the host organization?
The host organization.
Yes, what you, the family, pay the host organization to get all of the paperwork and then eventually get the DS-20, what the cost is. You know, by any chance?
I do not.
It's upwards of $8,000 to $10,000. So you must really, 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 really need this person to come in and help with the kids while they're also doing a little bit of studying on the side. It's actually not cheap. That's why you tend to see that it's a lot of wealthy families that tend to use these type of programs, and they can bring in you know 18 to 26-year-old, usually women from I don't know, Eastern Europe or wherever. You can also imagine that there's a lot of scrutiny from the government when it comes to certain of these categories because there's obviously room for abuse. But the host organization, whether it's the company employing you, whether it's a family for an au pair, whether it's the camp where you're going to be a camp counselor, right, goes to the program sponsor to get DS 2019. And in a very few limited circumstances, they're actually one and the same. Again, Disney, Exxon, HP. Um, and now I am totally off track. Let's bring this around. Okay, here we go. So I get my DS 2019. Am I able to include family members as part of this process?
Yes. So you can include a spouse and minor children. They're going to come as dependents as a J2. And each of them actually has to get their own DS 2019 based on the primary.
So it's actually very similar to again the student visa, where the student has to get an I-20, and then the family members also have to get their own I-20s in order to be included. If I get a J2, if I get a J1, and my spouse gets a J2 and enters the country with me, can my spouse work?
Yes, so they can apply for an EAD. And actually, looping back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the J1's ability to support themselves, they can use the J2 spouse's income as a part of their ability to support themselves if they can get the EAD quick enough.
Now, remember the employment authorization document, the EAD, is not automatic. So when you're the principal applicant and you get a work visa, I mean, you're work authorized, right? I mean, once you enter on that visa, you're automatically work authorized. Dependents, on the other hand, that are eligible have to apply for an EAD and wait till they get it. So just because you entered on a J2 doesn't mean you're automatically authorized to work. The J1 would be for the host organization, but the J2 has to submit the application to USCIS and then wait for it to come back in order to work. Okay, so um, I'm outside the US. I got my DS 2019. I need to apply for the visa. What's next? How do I apply for the visa?
So you would schedule an appointment with the consulate. One thing to note is that it does vary depending on which consular post you're going to. So you're going to want to look at the U.S. consulate that you're having an appointment with and figure out their exact requirements for it.
As always, each post does their own thing. I mean, as an example, you have to, for Mexico, you have to create an account, log in, schedule a biometrics appointment, and then schedule a separate interview. Um, so it kind of varies. Always just check the State Department website for that embassy and see what their procedures are. Um, when can so when you get a J1, right, there's going to be like a program start date, just like when you get an I-20 when you're going to school, right? School starts at a certain time. DS 2019, same thing as a program start date. So how far in advance of that start date can I apply for the visa?
So the visa can be issued up to 90 days before that J1 program start date.
So the 90 days before I applied, got the visa, I took like a week. When's the earliest I can enter the United States on that visa?
So you can actually enter the US on that visa up to 30 days before the program start date.
And then if you said a lot of the programs are like 12 or maybe 18 months, it depends. Or a lot of them are actually like summer based. There's like the camp counselors and stuff. When my program ends, when do I have to leave?
So you have 30 days after the program's completed to wrap up anything you need to in the country. And then at the end of that 30 days, you have to leave the country.
There's a grace period, 30-day grace period, which is nice. So up to now, we've talked about some of the basic requirements, right? Basically, figure out which program you're eligible for, figure out who the program sponsor is going to be, right? You go to them, get your DS 2019. Now, there is a potential downside to the J-1. It is called the 2-year home residency requirement. Now, this is something very unique to J's. I mean, it only applies to J's. What is it?
So basically, if you are subject to this, and in certain cases you are, there's a 2-year home residency requirement where you have to return to your country of residence and remain there for a cumulative 2 years before you can re-enter the US.
I mean, it kind of makes sense logically. Like, this is an exchange program. You're supposed to come in, learn, and go home. So why would you stay? But this does not apply to everybody. The way you're going to know is it's going to say it on your DS 2019. And then when you get the visa stamped, there's a spot at the bottom where they can annotate, they can add stuff. So usually, like, they'll put the employer's name there and other things. And it will say subject to the 2-year home residency requirement or not, right? That's the key. You'll see there whether you are or are not subject, because not everyone is subject to it. Well, I guess who is subject to the 2-year home residency requirement?
So, if your program was financed in whole or in part by the US government or your government of residency or nationality, then you would be subject to it. Also, if the country of residence and intended field of endeavor or skill appear on the skills list, then the application for the J-1 visa or US admission, then it will be subject to that 2-year residency requirement. And finally, individuals that hold the J-1 status in order to receive graduate medical education or training would be subject.
So, first one is if it was financed by the US government or the foreign government, you're likely subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. One of the places we see this pop up all the time is Fulbright scholarships, which are actually financed by the US government. And so you'll see people will get a Fulbright scholarship, get a J-1 to come and do something in the United States, and then they're subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. Um, Again, you also mentioned basically if you're going to do your residency. So if got your medical degree and you're going to do your residency in the United States via the J-1, because doing your residency it's kind of tricky. The way the rules are kind of written, I mean, it's not 100%, it's not absolute, but you're kind of forced into the J-1 in order to do your residency. And if you're automatically subject to your home residency requirement, pretty much across the board. The other one is the skills list. Now, the skills list gets a bit confusing. Basically, the skills list is where your home country has said, this skill is so important, America, don't keep them. We don't want the brain drain, right? We need them to come back. We're seeing that right now. Again, depending on when you're watching this, there was the whole debacle with the US pullout from Afghanistan. And the Taliban was getting a little frustrated because they're like, well, US, if you take all of our best and brightest, we're not going to have doctors and engineers, and we need those people. So it's kind of the same thing. So first off, you can go to the State Department and look up the skills list by country. Uh, Basically, if your country is listed, then there are some skills that are on the skills list. If your country is not listed, then you're probably going to be fine. So let's throw some out here. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Andrew, name a country.
Let's go with Kazakhstan.
You had to pick.
Mexico.
Kazakhstan is on the list. Mexico. Mexico is not on the list. Cool. Mexico's cool with you coming over, getting your training, and then never leaving. How about another one?
India.
India's on the list. China's on the list also, just so you know. Any other random countries?
Let's go Montenegro.
Montenegro. They're on the list.
Okay.
Anyway,
About
anyway,
and
there's what? I'm going to guess here and say there's about at least 80 to 90, maybe more, maybe as many as 100 countries on this list. Have you ever heard of Timor-Leste?
more Leste, is that
I feel bad that I'm not sure. Wow, the Palestinian Authority's on here. That's interesting. Um, anyway, you check the list. And if your country's on the list, then oh man, now I got to go check the skills list. And basically, the countries have listed out, the things that they want. So it's not like the specific skills that apply to each country is not the same. If I remember right, I was looking at China not that long ago, and it seemed to be pretty large compared to some other countries. Let me see here. Let me try to pull up an example here of a country. So, okay, well, let's hit so when you look at the skills list, it lists out the different groups, right? So they're like, let's just throw out one here. Group 14 is engineering. Group 13 is education. So let's just say group 14 is engineering. I go down to China, and it says all of group 14 is listed. Like that's just what it says. China mainland, all of group 14. Actually, it says all of group 1, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11. It's a really long list. Oh my gosh. Like all of almost every single group. But right below that, there's Colombia. And Colombia is just group 1.01, 1.06, 1.12, and all of group 3. That's it. So if you're an engineer from Colombia, you're not going to be on the skills list. You're fine. You're not subject to your home residency requirement. If you get a J-1 from China, you're almost guaranteed to be on the skill on the, you're going to be subject either through some type of government sponsorship or through the skills list. So go to the State Department website, check whether or not your country's listed. If it is, then you can pull up it's part of the Federal Register. It's there on the website. And basically, again, you scroll down, you see what groups are listed under your country. Actually, you said Kazakhstan. There you go, Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan only lists group 1.1, 1.11, 1.12, all of group 3, all of group 4, and that's it. Oh, wait, no. Groups 10, 11, and part of group 9. I know there's more here. Oh, actually, no. Kazakhstan gets really nitty gritty. They don't list all of groups. They list a bunch of different groups, but they break it down into the subsections. So anyway, getting back on track. J-1 skills list. You might be subject to your home residency requirement. So the first question is, well, I'm from China. It looks like I'm pretty much screwed. I'm going to be subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. Is there any way around it?
Yes. So there's 5 grounds for waivers, and those are first off, exceptional hardship to a U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse or child. So if you came over here and got married and your spouse now depends on you for income, medical care, whatever, there's a potential waiver. Also, fear of persecution based on race, religion, or political opinion. So basically, if you go and say, I'm worried that I'm going to get killed if I go back to, say, Afghanistan,
Or
you
let's say
can get an
you're
exemption.
let's say you're a Chinese, I'm going to say this wrong, Uyghur.
Uyghur.
Okay. If you're a Chinese Uyghur and you got a J-1 and you're subject to your home residency requirement, you may claim a waiver under fear of persecution based on race, religion, or political opinion, right? Like I said, same thing for Afghanistan. So what other grounds do we have?
So number 3 is a request by an interested government agency. So if the U.S. really wants to make an exception for you,
Yo, this
uh,
guy over here makes really good bombs, and we like bombing people, so we're going to give him a waiver. But I
exactly.
guess that's an option. We would hope it'd be more like, I don't know, the CDC is like, yo, this dude's developing a vaccine or, is involved in that. That would be the one we'd hope that they would want to grant. It'd be like, no, he's cool. We'll give him a J-1 waiver. He's doing cool stuff that helps, the United States.
No objection from the home country's government. So basically getting the home country to say that they're cool waiving it. And then finally, a request from an interested government agency or State Department of Health on behalf of a foreign medical graduate who received graduate medical education or training in the U.S., who will also uh, be serving either in a health professional shortage area, a medically underserved area, or a mental health professional shortage area. Basically, middle of nowhere America or the prison system.
Yeah, so the last one really applies to people like doing their like to doctors and people doing their residency. And if you've ever wondered where you're like, I was driving from Chicago to Texas and I was in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, and I got sick. I went to the doctor and it was some doctor from India in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. You're like, how did this guy even like end up there? You're like, well, it may be because he's actually serving in a rural, underserved area in order to get a J-1 waiver. There's also a national interest waiver for physicians that allows them to apply for residency by serving in an underserved area for 5 years. So it can also be part of that. But that's why it's not uncommon to see like a foreign doctor like working in the middle of nowhere, or in certain cases it can, well, for the national interest waiver, it can be for the VA. Now, coming back to the no objection letter. That typically applies to either skills list or because of funding from the foreign government. Here's the thing though, there's no guarantee. Usually in our case, we have to reach out to, let's say, hey, I'm from Argentina. So we reach out to the US Embassy from Argentina, like in DC. Well, they have a consulate in Houston, but anyway, we would reach out to the Argentine embassy and see if we could solicit a no objection letter. And it varies wildly. My experience has been there's some countries, some embassies that are like, sure, no problem, whatever, we don't care. And others that are just like, no, we don't do that. I remember when we reached out to Russia, they were just like, no, we don't do that. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. And I think we ended up having to go with an exceptional hardship to a U.S. citizen because their person was married. So that can really vary. One of the ones we're actually working on now is a little bit trickier because no objection we're trying to get a no objection from the State Department involving a Fulbright scholar. Because that actually came from the US government. So that's a little bit trickier. So, but actually, Andrew, you should know there's another exception. It's not a waiver. It's just a way to get a non-immigrant visa, but it's not a permanent fix. What visa can I get that I can get even though I have a 2-year home residency requirement and I don't have a waiver?
I want to say that's
Pretty sure you worked on the case. Or at least saw the case.
an H-1B, right?
No, the O. If you're subject
The
to the
O.
2-year home residency requirement and you don't have a waiver, you can still get an O. There's a couple of different visas that you can still get. The main one we tend to see is the O. Now, you typically can't file a change of status from J to O. O is for extraordinary ability, right? These are the people at the very top of their field. So if you're over here as like, I don't know, a scientist or research or Fulbright scholar, and then you think you're eligible for an O, you can submit your O application to USCIS. And then once they approve it, you have to leave, apply for the visa, and then re-enter. Now, it's not a waiver. So if you decide, well, hey, I got the O visa, there's a residency category that's almost identical. Can I apply for residency now? It's like, well, no, you're still subject to your home residency requirement unless you get a waiver. but you can get an O without a waiver if you're subject to it. Again, remember, it's based on whether you got government funding, skills list, or medical profession. For skills list, you got to look whether or not your country's even listed, and then if it is, what are the professions specifically that it applies to? Because it could be very well be that your country's on the list, but your profession's not. Cool. You're right. Again, we said, like, if you're from China, you're pretty much toast. You're going to get a 2-year home residency requirement. So one of the things I wanted to dive in a little bit more to, specifically around physicians, we talk about people coming and serving a residency on a J-1 are automatically subject to a 2-year home residency requirement, and there's a distinction sort of between clinical and non-clinical J-1s. So, I mean, what's the kind of quick explanation of what are the clinical requirements to get a J-1 as a physician?
So basically, you have to have already had the education and training to participate in those programs. You have to be able to adapt to the training environment in the U.S. You have to have just the general background and experience suitable to the program, and actually be requiring the training that's going to entail. Proficiency in English, both written and oral, and then pass certain testing testing requirements for that sort of program. It's kind of the basics of it.
Now, if you're subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, right, which means you are you're doing the clinical practice, essentially the residency. You're automatically subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, and you can't get a waiver, like a no objection waiver from a government, right? You have to get there's a specific type of waiver. It's got a nice name. It's called the Conrad 30 waiver program. Again, we're talking specifically about physicians. What are the general requirements for the Conrad 30 waiver?
So basically, they have to have been admitted into the U.S. for this program, the medical residency, essentially. Enter into a full-time employment contract to practice medicine in the H-1B status for at least 3 years at a healthcare facility located somewhere that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services uh, has designated as a health professional shortage area, a medically underserved area, or a medically underserved population, or be serving patients who reside in one of those areas. They would also have to obtain a no objection statement in writing from their home country. Um, if they were already contractually obligated to return to that home country after completion of the J-1 program. And finally, they have to agree to begin that employment in a healthcare facility within 90 days of receiving the waiver.
Yeah, so basically a Conrad waiver and they're not easy to get, and they're actually kind of complicated, and there's people that actually kind of specialize in this field. Um, but the idea is that if you are able to get a Conrad waiver, then you can file essentially a change of status from J to H, even though you would normally have been subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. Um, so it is this interesting little exception for people that do their sort of clinical residency here. Now, circle back, summary here, J-1, bunch of different programs. Go to the State Department website, look it up, find the one that may work for you. Once you find a program, same website, you can look around for program sponsors. These are the people set up to issue the DS 2019. So obviously, if you have an employer your employer will have to work with the program sponsor to get the DS 2019. Once you have the DS 2019, if you're here, maybe you can file a change of status, leave, apply for the visa, and then you're here as part of your program again, as a trainee, an intern, a camp counselor, as a scholar, as an au pair, whatever it may be. Um, it is, and then the other really, really important thing is obviously before you even really go too far down this road, you need to double check whether or not you're going to be subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, because that may obviously change your mind depending on where you're from to be like, maybe I'll pursue a different option. Again, J is a great option for a lot of different people we've discussed. We also see it as an option for people who aren't selected in H-1B cap and need to like, hey, how can I get one more year? It can sometimes also be an option. Anyway, J-1, really weird, unique visa. If you have questions, you can always go to our website, keyvisa.com. You can set up a consultation with one of us in order to sort of delve into the details of your specific case, figure out if the J or any other option will work for you. As always, go download our app. That is the Lawpilot Guardian. Lots of useful information there. That the basic app is free. Of course, we're always adding more features there. But Andrew, any final thoughts on the J-1?
I do just want to reiterate that for that home residency requirement, it does have to be country of residence. I've heard stories of folks that thought it was like other visas where at the end you just have to leave the country until you can get another status. And we'll say that the guy was from China, decided to hang out in the south of France for a couple of years. And then when he applied to re-enter, it was a no-go. So
No, it's because your country says they want you back. So you have to go to your country. It's not just like, Costa Rica's nice, man. I can go hang out there for 2 years. And I heard there's a lot of medical tourism. I can practice as a doctor down there and then move back. No, like you need to go to your home country. Anyway, Andrew, thank you as always. Stay tuned as we continue in our series of non-immigrant visas. We'll be back next week with another visa category, and then eventually we're going to move on to all of the employment-based green card categories. Thank you for tuning in. Like I said, if you have any questions, go to our website, set up a consultation, and we're more than happy to discuss your options with you. But thank you.